Pokémon has always been one of the largest and most beloved franchises in the Nintendo universe ever since the very first game, so it's only natural for it to have a large presence in Super Smash Bros. Second only to maybe the Mario and Fire Emblem series, it's no surprise that out of the 88 fighters in Smash Ultimate for Pokémon to occupy more than 10% of that. Well known in their game of origin for their iconic RPG elements, Pokémon are no strangers to combat, routinely facing off against their fellow creatures with the sport of kids, teens, and adults the world over, making use of their various types, abilities, and most of all, moves. There's a fairly extensive amount of source material, so much so that my friend Mockrock is going to make a video theorizing potential movesets for other Pokémon if they were to ever come out. In fact, I'm going to be part of that video, so stay tuned for it. In any case, with how acquainted Pokémon is with fighting and their elaborate repertoire of attacks, it made designing their movesets in-game rather colorful. Contrasting from Smash's other main lines boasting a multitude of fighters themselves, Pokémon has indisputably the most variety and diversity among its members, having extensive differences in playstyle and movesets between them that far surpasses that of any other. For example, a common yet personally unsubstantiated gripe in the early days of Smash Ultimate was how exhausted players were of the Fire Emblem franchise's new additions, citing how similarly each cast member played. I for one disagree with that notion. I think there's a lot of differences between the older characters, but I won't deny that Sword Fighter characters do definitely share a lot of the same game plan. Likewise with The Legend of Zelda, with Link, Toon Link, and Young Link's moves resembling each other in regards to theme and win condition. On the other hand, when you take a look at the roster of Pokémon, it's incredible to see just how different they are from one another, with the obvious exception of Pikachu and Pichu. I'd argue they have the most colorful cast of characters out of any franchise. But moveset variety isn't the only thing they're known for. Many of them happen to be incredibly powerful, with the likes of Pikachu, Greninja, and Pokémon Trainer ranking among the upper echelons of Ultimate's metagame. Yet curiously, despite fielding both a diverse and stacked roster of contenders, Pokémon tend to be some of the lesser used characters in the game. So far, I made a wide known plays on Pikachu, Mewtwo, Greninja, Incineroar, Pokémon Trainer, and Jigglypuff, which may or may not be an indication of a recurring instance here. Obviously, I'm not implying that the Pokémon archetype is the least played in the series, but for a roster of its size, for none of its members to have a relatively high presence in the metagame is a rare phenomenon. So, let's go through exactly what holds them back from mainstream attention, even in spite of a good number of them being very powerful. The core essence of Pokémon is founded in its usage of gimmicks. In the home series, Pokémon are mostly divided into gimmicks rather than archetypes. For example, electric types are known for being fast, possessing high offensive stats at the cost of low defense. For the likes of Raichu, Electro, Jolteon, Manectric, and stuff, that is indeed correct. But on the other hand, you have comparatively slower, bulkier electric types such as Bellibolt, Magnezone, Electros, and Vikavolt, who still hit like a truck but trade speed for occasionally more durability. Said exceptions apply to every rule, and by a noticeable amount too. So rather than making archetypes out of Fire, Water, Dragon, Steel, Ghost type, they designate gimmicks for Pokemon. For example, you have Pokemon that excel in stall teams, Pokemon for sweeping, Pokemon for disruption, Pokemon for type coverage, etc. Admittedly, I haven't been up to date with the competitive scene as I used to play mostly in Gen 6 and 7, but regardless, how does this transfer over to Smash? Rather faithfully. Pokemon in Smash are the least beholden to archetypes compared to the others. Instead, they focus on their own playstyle and identity, or in other words, they have their own gimmicks. Evaluating Greninja at a service level, it's hard to really call him a brawler even though one might think he is one. Greninja plays more like a hit and runner, not unlike Xerxes, Samus, and Inkling, but at the same time he plays very differently, even from members of that archetype. Evaluating Mewtwo or Lucario, who both possess variants of Charge Shot, neither of them play anywhere near remotely close to a Zoner or Trapper the way Samus, Wii Fit Trainer, and Mii Gunner do. In fact, though he was viewed as the spiritual successor to Mewtwo, Lucario doesn't play anything like him. Mewtwo's amazing ground speed allows him to play uncharacteristically aggressive for someone of his resilience or lack thereof, having a smothering advantage state on par with sword fighters and amazing area coverage. Meanwhile, Lucario is a close quarters fighter who alternates between playing hot and cold, with his trademark aura mechanic making him extremely high risk but extremely high reward. It's safe to say that no two Pokemon play exactly the same way, not even Pikachu and Pichu. The former plays more evasive hit-and-run punish-oriented, while the latter plays rush-down in your face. Their properties differ greatly from each other, as opposed to Link, Young Link, and Toon Link, who all sort of look for the same things. How this adversely affects their popularity is that it forces anyone with a vested interest in playing them to learn them entirely from scratch, forfeiting them from relying on any preconceptions from other characters to learn this one. Mewtwo and Lucario may have charge shots, but their playstyles fundamentally differ from other charge shot characters to the point where you can't even call them the same archetype. If you oversimplify it, then yes, you can spam Aura Sphere or Shadow Ball until the end of time, but without supplemental zoning pressure such as Wii Fit's Header or Samus's Bombs, merely having a charge shot is not sufficient enough at defaulting to that playstyle. It's not those projectiles alone that makes them scary, it's that they can create situations that make the likelihood of getting blasted by one extremely high. Mewtwo's Shadow Ball is more of a pressure tool to set up his other tools, rather than those other tools creating pressure to set up into Shadow Ball. So you have to think of a Pokemon-specific gimmick and learn to play around said gimmick. But oftentimes, the more unusual a character is, the more impractical or unintuitive they can be. Lucario is an even bigger offender of this. All things considered, his moveset isn't half bad. He has good close quarters moves and situationally powerful specials, but his viability gets hamstrung completely by the fluctuating power of each attack. Honestly, if Aura was taken out and his moves were balanced accordingly, he would probably be a much better character. Mewtwo as well, he's the Sephiroth before Sephiroth. Circumstantially, Mewtwo can be a more threatening mid-range fighter than the very class that specializes in that field of combat, but his gimmick leads to a wider performance range without necessarily the right incentive to play for it. Think about it like this, you have character A with a performance range of 80 to 120 and character B with a performance range of 60 to 140. Both of them average out at 100, but character B fluctuates a lot more, making them more inconsistent by design. The idea is that on paper, by having a greater downside, you have a greater upside, but in practice, with the burden of execution always taking precedence, you're gonna see more 60 than you're gonna see 140 because the onus falls on you to reach that 140. It's not like a roll of the die or a coin flip where there's an equal chance of getting any possibility. In Smash, you have to work towards that possibility, while the lower range will always be there no matter how good you get in light of your opponent also influencing the performance range in question. Theoretically, Max Aura Lucario is one of the deadliest characters known to man. Leo found that out firsthand at Miami. But that's assuming Lucario can get to that percentage and then never get hit for the rest of the match. It's simply not tenable. And what did Leo do afterwards? He spent the entire rest of the game never letting Vivi make a move. Essentially, higher variance is almost always a negative thing in competitive games because you're fighting against the current. The reason characters like Palutena, Rob, Steve, Snake, and Cloud are so popular is because they have tight performance ranges, which are conducive to consistent performance. Being inherently gimmicky characters, every Pokemon suffers from performance inconsistency to some capacity. Pikachu was once regarded as the best character in the game, but with no conclusive empirical data to back up that claim, everyone now thinks he's overrated. It's true that Pikachu's assets greatly outweigh his flaws, but compared to other characters with a similar nature as him, Pikachu can be surprisingly difficult and exhausting to play. As a Cloud main, I can't imagine how Pikachu scores kills in neutral outside of setups. He doesn't really have an easy straight hit option like a back air, forward tilt, up tilt, or something like that. His edge guarding is one of the best in the game, but that requires you to win the onstage game first, and it doesn't help that he's very susceptible to getting walled out, rendering his offstage pressure basically ineffective in certain situations. On top of adding more fluctuations in performance, the gimmicks of each Pokemon can drastically skew their properties, which is thematically faithful to their games of origin. Pokemon can strongly counter one group of enemies and get strongly countered by another group. In Smash though, as mentioned with consistency, even if it means not having as high of a ceiling, having a balanced matchup spread is top priority. Take Greninja for instance. Greninja is known for his immaculate speed both on the ground and in the air. The way he can move around, especially with his varying movement mix-up options like Water Shurikens, Air Stall, or Shadow Sneak, he can move. Arguably one of the most difficult fighters to catch if he commits to playing evasively, and if he gets in on you, he can combo you and pressure you like crazy no matter how high above or how far off stage you are. All those strengths come at the expense of an egregious vulnerability to being pressured himself, possessing little if any means of breaking out a shield or shrugging off disadvantage. And just like I talked about with that fluctuating range, even if hypothetically Greninja can achieve more pressure than other high movement characters like ZSS or Wolf, not having a get off me tool invalidates his strengths. Comparing Greninja to someone like Steve, Greninja can run circles around Steve until the end of time thanks to Steve having rather terrible movement outside of Minecart, but eventually he has to interact with Steve, which Steve can use to just outbox, outbrain data, out everything him. On the opposite end of the spectrum, Incineroar bets all his chips on power. He trades almost all semblance of functional mobility for extreme close quarters combat. Everyone remarks on how if he had the physics of Cloud or Zero Suit, he would be an even bigger threat than Fox, and I'd have to agree. Incine's tendency to get kited by anyone remotely faster than him is a single reason keeping him balanced, and though with Skyj's recent success calling his low tier status into question, it still doesn't change the fact that Incine's problems are indeed very problematic. You still have to play extremely reckless on him and go for big YOLO callouts because trying to play the normal way on him just won't work. In a lot of cases, this guy has way more kill power than Bowser, but the reason Bowser is agreed upon as a better heavyweight is because Bowser has a better balance of attributes. Even Pokemon Trainer, who has 3 completely different Pokemon packed into one, has very skewed properties. Squirtle has great speed, a good combo game, solid throws, small hurtbox, and fantastic frame data, but he has basically no damage or kill power to speak of. His smash attacks and back throw are extremely powerful, but he lacks the means to set up into them the way even his fellow Pokemon Pikachu can with stuff like Nair into down smash or down tilt dash attack. And let's not forget, Squirtle has a poor off-stage game. Ivysaur has incredibly dangerous mid-range pressure, and unlike Squirtle, great kill confirms. He's got a noticeably stronger neutral game and can rack up percent without much difficulty, but like, half his moveset isn't even usable. He also has, inarguably, the worst disadvantage of the 3 and the worst air control as well. Charizard has brutishly strong power and great mid-range, being able to play the spacing game and having fantastic throws plus a respectably strong out-of-shield game. But his moves are among the least safe on shield, and most if not all of them require serious commitment to be used, giving him a bad neutral game relative to the other two. Because you can only ever access one Pokemon at a time, you're always dealing with the glaring weaknesses of each one whether you like it or not. And with all three of them sharing the same weakness of a bad disadvantage, they're all prone to being overwhelmed, especially off stage. So despite having 3 Pokemon, they're still beholden to the wide variance in performance, probably more so given you have to balance 3 of them. To be fair, every character in this game has strengths and weaknesses, glaring ones at that. So why am I making a big deal out of this for Pokemon than for other characters? Because their entire designs are based around having extreme strengths and extreme weaknesses. That's the whole premise. Pokemon are designed to not be balanced. The closest we get is Pikachu, and even then you wouldn't call him the same kind of well-rounded fighter as Mario or Palutena, would you? Mewtwo, extreme, Pikachu, extreme, Jigglypuff, extreme, Pokemon Trainer, extreme, Lucario, extreme, Greninja, extreme, Incineroar, extreme. There is not a single Pokemon that's designed to be a general all-purpose fighter. Each of them fully spec into a certain field and leave themselves wide open somewhere else, but that's the whole point of the franchise. There is no Pokemon who can take on every other Pokemon without problem. Try as they may, there's always a weak point. Mewtwo was created to be this ultimate Pokemon who can triumph over anybody, but a good dark or ghost type will put him in his place. The point of Pokemon is not to find the ultimate one, but the ultimate team. A group of 6 Pokemon covering each other's weak points and augmenting each other's strengths. And no, I don't care how many videos of can you beat Pokemon with only X or how many monotype playthroughs you watch. The goal of the series is to create a well-balanced, well-constructed team that can handle most if not all situations. Isolated from the teammates' help, a Pokemon's weaknesses become very clear, and since Pokemon fighters were made to have really high peaks and really low valleys, whether or not it's canonically accurate to the source material, cough cough Mewtwo, Pokemon are heavily exploitable. Pokemon Trainer, despite being a team of 3, are designed to where all 3 Pokemon share the same issue of really bad disadvantage states in exchange for oppressive advantage states. This doesn't mean Pokemon are weak or badly designed, it's just the way they were specifically designed can be a big turnoff in competitive, where players value reliability over explosivity. Putting all your eggs into one basket and leaving nothing for the rest doesn't make for a very good choice in the long term. That being said, the potential for optimization is there, and we're beginning to see the consequences of it. Having talked in the last video about Skyj's breakout performances with Incineroar or base mage with Jigglypuff, fully committing to a Pokemon's win condition and doing your best to prevent them from exploiting your weak points will net you results far greater than other characters in your respective tier. It just takes a serious, almost unrealistic amount of time and investment to exhaustively explore the ins and outs of a character. I'm still a believer that on paper Pikachu is top 3. Ever since Sam stopped going to majors, Shiny Mark has taken over as the best Pikachu in the world, and he's been inching closer and closer to that optimal Pikachu we've all been theorizing about. Quid, if the guy actually traveled, could show us just how BS Pokemon Trainer can be when you fully master all 3 of them. Tarek has been proving to us that Greninja might actually be a contender for top 20. The point is, Pokemon characters have potential, a lot of it. Accessing that potential is an overwhelmingly daunting task, which is why there aren't that many representatives for any of them. But the few who do are beginning to showcase what happens if you tap into the upper levels of their performance ranges. That concludes my assessment on the Pokemon franchise and Smash. Let me know your thoughts on them in the comments down below, whether you agree or disagree with my viewpoint on them. As always though, if you enjoyed the video, it would be great if you left a like and subscribed. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other character discussions if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.